First on the agenda, apologies, we actually have 3 items listed for the 7 p.m. slot. So I'm going to have to just go in order that they are here. Hopefully people are here. But we first have a public hearing on 15 Whitcomb Ave from the Littleton Water Department and Corey Godfrey. Is somebody in the audience representing Littleton Water? If so, raise your hand, please.
Matt, if not, I can certainly speak on behalf of that. It's a minor issue, but
just want to make sure. So yes, Jim, please tell us what you got.
Okay. So they built the new water treatment plant down in Whitcomb Ave. And so it'll be a staffed facility, has to have a bathroom. They put a small septic system in. When we were reviewing the septic system plans, the plans got revised once, and somehow the revised plans didn't make it into the bid documents. And so when they put the system in, they put it in according to the bid plans. So a couple of minor things, the manhole covers being the biggest one. Your regulations don't allow the use of plastic covers at grade. Typically in people's backyard, the concern has been that if somebody doesn't put the screws back in the plastic covers, it's a potential hazard in the yard. The tanks here in the water treatment facility have plastic covers and to grade. They have kind of the hex screws, so hopefully people can't readily get at them. It is a staff site, so it's not like it is kids around it and that. It also, and something new to me I hadn't seen before, they have these devices they put in the risers, so that if you were to leave the cover off, you can't really slip into the tank. There's this plastic device that kind of catches you so that you can't fall into the tank, which is the first time I've ever seen, so I need to get the name of the product. So I don't really see an issue with granting the variance here. Again, there'd be somebody, when they have the tank pump that's a staff site, the staff of the building can make sure the covers get back on and screwed back in place. So I didn't think it was an issue.
So questions from the board? Kevin Baker?
I don't have a question. I was going to make a motion if you'll accept it, but if you want to wait to hear the other comments. Sure.
Anything from Kevin Davis?
I only have a concern, only that no, actually I don't have a concern. Never mind. No, I'm good with what's there. It's going to be a man site. It's going to be professionally maintained, so I'm all good with it.
I just have a curiosity question, Jim, of what would it take to actually retrofit it with the concrete system?
Risers and covers. Yeah. It's a cost issue, I think, at this point. It was installed so to be kind of a cost override for the town, the change of work order. So I get it was in someone's backyard, or if there's a big neighborhood nearby, or if it wasn't a staff site, I think I'd have a bigger concern. But
so what about instead of using a plastic cover, you put a metal cover on it instead?
They're not easily affixed to the plastic risers. Yeah, no, yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Nope. Kevin Baker.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance to allow the plastic risers and plastic riser covers as requested.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Passed. Next on the agenda, 7 o'clock. Public hearing for 37 Dogwood Road continued. Cheryl Gould from the Gould Law Offices. I do not see Cheryl in the audience. Is somebody else representing? Oh. Galaxy S22?
Yep, that's me. I'm here.
Okay, please say your name and address for the record.
Sorry. Cheryl Gould, Gould Law Offices, 311 Great Road, Littleton.
Okay. Jim, can you get us started with an update?
Sure. So there was a request for an extension. So there's a housing inspection done on this property. As is allowed by the housing code, they request an extension of time. Often that's necessary when they're doing construction work. particularly if you've got materials or scheduling contractors. We've been out, I've been out to do a couple of re-inspections. Not all the violations are corrected. I did talk with the contractor who was doing the work the last time I was there about the remaining items. I saw that earlier there was a housing code variance request. I'm not sure, that maybe a little premature at this point because we haven't corrected the rest of the violations. And the housing code has changed a bit, so the procedure for applying for a variance is more spelled out, and I think it needs to be followed. One of the things that the process says is the Board of Health can't vary a section of the code that may be another regulatory body's jurisdiction. So for what they're requesting, the reduction of the ceiling height, I'd really need to speak with the building department to see if that would be in violation of the building code to do that. So again, I think that's a little bit premature. So I think that's the update at this point.
So to be clear, when were you last there?
7/12.
Okay. And that was in time of our last meeting. That's when we'd been promised that things would be remedied, and you're saying not everything is done yet?
Correct.
Okay. Cheryl, do you have some input?
Yeah, I would like to. I met with Mr. Griffey and the contractor on site on 7/12. And if I could just go through what's not remedied, because I think they've done the lion's share of it. And Mr. Griffey, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I think that most of it is not life safety. Mr. Mann, the contractor, told us both, Mr. Griffey, that he would be back the next day with all the materials, and I assumed he was. When I checked today, I found he wasn't. But first of all, the septic system he's going to do this Friday, I think it's been too wet to get at it, and that he showed you, I think the fill around the tank is settling, and the paperwork's supposed to be in. So I don't really know too much about that. The other things that I went around the house with Mr. Griffey and the contractor is 2 electrical outlets. One was going to just get a dummy plate, and one was going to get a switch plate. Again, Kyle told me he was going the next day to get the stuff. I just assumed they were in by now and didn't check. They were so minor. But those I will do myself tomorrow and send you pictures if you want. There was a sweep on the front door. I can probably get Wayne Co to do that. My ex-husband will run and do that if I need to. And I think the floor register, there was nothing wrong with the floor register except it was missing the threshold, Mr. Griffey. And so it was likely to cause somebody to be scratched or something. So he's trying to get that part, but it's aftermarket. And I think there was one casement window lock, but I could be wrong about that.
So there are still some other defects in the house. I walked through with the contractor. It's an older house. One of the concerns early on was mice getting into the house, and if you go into the basement, it's partially fieldstone, partially probably sitting on the ground up on the high side of the house. There's lots of holes in the foundation along the sill plate that allow critters in and out. A moisture problem, which is probably a bigger issue because it's at the top of the hill, but the code doesn't really take into account where your houses are. It's supposed to, the moisture is supposed to be addressed. There's some other issues with the weather tightness of some of the windows, so there's some of that work needs to be done. They did correct some of the balusters on the deck, but it's one of these things where it needs to check with the building inspector to make sure that the work complies with the building code. Broken window in the basement. It's things like storm door closures missing. Attorney Gould mentioned the door sweep so that the door can be weather tight. The rotted deck boards need to be replaced. Not many of them, but there's a few of them that need to be done. We talked about put the floor register, the threshold for the bedroom into the main hallway. It's kind of there's a significant difference in the flooring, so you need to put some kind of a threshold or something like that on there. The ceiling height, which is the variance request, but again, I think that needs to be addressed. in accordance with the new code. And the septic system's been installed probably for a year. It needed a poly barrier. That's how the board approved it back when you approved it. That barrier wasn't installed. It's still not installed, which means the engineer can't certify the system at this point. So that work also needs to be done.
So, excuse me, Mr. Chair, through you.
Pardon?
I said, excuse me, Mr. Chair, may I speak through you? May I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
So clearly the septic system is Kyle's responsibility. He's a septic installer and I can't speak to that one. But based upon the list, I just tried to write as fast as Mr. Griffey was talking. I'll bring in a second contractor if I have to. We relied on this one. He told us he was coming back. I apologize that he didn't. I'm just here to present in front of you, not to take my hammer over there, but I will get it done. The owner relied on his promises.
Okay, questions, comments from the board? Kevin Baker.
Jim, what's the status on the poly barrier? It seems like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of little construction issues that some of them are safety issues. I don't know why when the system was put in, the barrier wasn't put in at the same time.
Yeah, it's weird.
So
It's also not like Kyle to leave it out.
Yeah. No, I have no other comments. I mean, it's pretty clear what has to be done, and there's a very specific list of things that just need to be tended to and taken care of. And it seems like we've been talking about this for 2 months, and
Yep.
it's been the same list. I mean, it's just they need to get somebody reliable over there who has the time to do it.
In fairness, the list is whittled down to like 5 remaining things. It was a single spaced full page and a half before, so.
I don't know if we ever saw the full list way back when. It just came to us when it started to become an issue, and it was delayed. So
Yeah.
hopefully you could find someone to take care of the issues. But yeah, I'm a little more concerned about the poly barrier not being in. That's like the weirdest thing I've ever heard, because it's been a long time. That's all
He
I have.
told me today he'd get there Friday on that.
Okay.
Kevin Davis.
So the poly barrier is also a major concern of mine, because I think the poly barrier has to go like completely either the bottom of the foundation or to the bottom of the septic design. Is that correct, Jim?
So in this case here, the system, if you're facing the house, the system is a good distance to the right of it. And so the barrier would go on the downhill side. They put the barrier in to maintain, to be able to minimize the flow going down the hill.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah, so it shouldn't affect the house. And at this point here, it hasn't broken out or anything like that, but that would be the purpose, to make sure that barrier's in there.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I had it on the wrong side. Okay, so that's to protect everybody else around the system, so we don't have issues going in. I mean, so that means it's like, 3, 4 feet, 5 feet into the ground that they're going to have to dig and put this thing in, right?
Yeah, sometimes when they put barriers in, and again, I'm not a contractor, I've never put a system in, but sometimes it's easier once you put the grading fill in to go back afterwards with your excavator and dig a trench around the base of it, because now you actually have ground to be on. And so again,
totally.
I've never installed, but I've seen people do it all kinds of different ways.
Yeah, fair enough. As long as it gets in, it's all good.
Yep.
Again, my ability to have empathy for what's going on at the site is quickly running out. This has been going on far too long. I really would like to see this finished as quickly as possible. That's all my comments.
Thank you, Kevin and Kevin, for that. I agree. We last talked about it 1 month ago, and we were quite promised that things would be taken care of within 2 weeks. I was skeptical of that, thought I communicated that, but the assurances were still given. 2 weeks, it's all going to be done. So I agree. I haven't seen the full list, but the fact that there are still this many items on a list is concerning to me. I believe a month ago, Jim, you were recommending a course of action for us to take, but kind of my open question is, what are our options as a board, and what would you officially recommend.
So at this point here, your next step could be to take the matter to housing court for, get compliance. My thought is, the list is half as much if it's done for your next meeting. That's really up to you, but housing court would be your next step. And then, you're probably, to file, you're probably, a month out by the time you get a date and get all the notices. So if you wanted to, have that as an option for your next meeting, that's entirely up to you.
I'm going to be generous, and my opinion is that we give them the whatever our next meeting is, the next 2 weeks or whatever it is, to get this done. And if it's not done, it's taken too long, in my opinion.
Our next meeting is in 2 weeks on the 9th of August.
Mr. Griffey, would I be able to get from you a list of the items, even if it's just an informal email?
Yep. I'll address it in a memo and send it off to the board and to
Thank
you
you.
so that you have that. And
Thank
I'll
you.
include, you mentioned in your letter not being able to get the variance request process. I'll make sure I provide that to you as well.
Thank you very much.
So Jim, there's the poly barrier on the list?
Yes, the issuance of a certificate of compliance for the septic system, and that would be needed to do that is on the list.
I mean, is having that poly barrier installed in a 2-week window realistic?
I believe so. Yeah, it's probably a day's worth of work and getting the engineers out there to pick it up so they can put it on the as-built and complete the as-built.
Okay, then I'm along the same lines as Kevin Davis, and I'll make a motion to allow another 2-week extension until our next meeting, August 9th, at which the board would like to see the list completed or move forward with housing court.
Thank you.
Second that.
Motion and a second, roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Perhaps as a part of that, we could get a written update, if you don't mind, by, what do we think? 1 week out, Friday the 4th before a meeting? What should we ask for here?
Jim, are you at our meeting on the 9th?
No, unfortunately, I need to be in Boxborough, but what I can do is I usually have notes for your meeting, so I can certainly, tell me when you'd like to have them and we can try to get those to them so you have them in a timely manner.
Well, I was going to try to push the onus off of you to make sure you were. I want to hear from either Attorney Gould or the representatives just directly or to you. I want to make sure that they're getting in touch with you on a certain date.
Okay.
And then potentially, I don't know, perhaps when would you want to go look at the property again, or do you not need to?
So once they've had an opportunity to do the rest of the corrections, they need to give me a call so I can back and do a reinspection. On the
Okay.
septic system portion of it, it's a matter of getting the work done, getting the engineers out there so they can finish that paperwork and getting that paperwork submitted so that I can actually issue a certificate of compliance on the septic system.
Okay. So let's make sure that happens, but perhaps, Cheryl, it might behoove you to maybe just 1 week out, get some communication to Jim on an update of just how things are going, so that if you are experiencing speed bumps or anything like that, it's not a surprise to us come 2 weeks out. If you would please do that.
I'll try my best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, our 7 o'clock public hearing on 30 Mill Lane, M&B Investments. Is that Doug, please?
That is the designer, yeah.
Okay, Matt is raising his hand. Matt, if you could state your name and address for the record.
Hello.
Hey there. Could you state your name and address for the record?
Matt Dusenberry from Land Engineering Environmental Services, 1 Bridgeview Circle, Tingsboro, Mass.
Jim, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So there's a existing house on this site that I believe they're looking to tear down and rebuild. It won't have any more bedrooms, so it's considered an upgrade for all intensive purposes, even though it'll be a brand new house. The bedroom size won't. So we did soil testing, tried to find the best spot for a septic system. It's up close to the property line, on the high side of the house, and you have a regulation that states that you prohibit the placement of fill within 10 feet of the lot lines. And most of that is to try to make sure you're not impacting abutting lots with surface runoff. So this requires fill, but fortunately this point of the lot is pretty level with the abutters and slopes away from the abutter. So I don't think it'll have that kind of an impact, but I don't know if Matt can share the plan. It's probably better. I'm probably not describing it as well as a picture might for you.
Yeah, Matt, can you share plans?
Yep.
Walk us through it.
Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay. So the proposed house is going to sit towards the middle of the lot for the existing house to be raised. We're proposing the septic system on the southerly side of the lot to the left of the house. As Jim said, it's uphill. And as you continue south, the land continues uphill. As he said, the drainage flows from the neighboring lot, flows onto our lot. So that the fill for the proposed septic system doesn't have really any impact on the neighboring lot. We're going to grade down from the septic system down a little down towards the neighboring lot, but it kind of makes a swale to keep all the drainage on our lot.
So the variance request is just the use of fill within 10 foot of the property line.
Correct.
And Jim, your summary recommendation was?
Again, it doesn't seem like it should affect the abutter, so I don't see that would be an issue. I don't know if the abutters here, I know I was playing phone tag with the direct abutter on the high side. I don't know if she's in the audience, in case you wanted that input there, but
We'll check on that in a second. Questions from the board members, Kevin Baker?
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Dusenberry. Wondering, I'm not seeing the test holes on the plan here. I'm just wondering if you did some additional test holes in the area where it states lot 8, 15,685 square feet. I'm just wondering if there are any.
So in that area, I wasn't on the site, but in that area, I guess there's ledge starting to peek out from the surface.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave it away.
there's a significant chunk of ledge about where that lot 8 is.
And Jim, you witnessed the perk. How did it perk?
It perked reasonably well. I don't know if you can see on the plan at the beginning and the end of the leaching area are test holes, and we had a perk at one of those test holes. So,
Okay.
did it perk at? It perked at 4 minutes an inch, so it's reasonably good soil.
Yeah, it's good. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Kevin Davis.
Yeah, I too would like the location of where the test holes were dug in the updated plans. I understand.
They're in there. They're just like really faint.
Are they really?
There's one at
Yeah,
either
they're
end.
circles. Black and white circles. Yeah.
If you can see my cursor.
Oh, I see
there's
him.
one
I see
there.
him. I see him. TP number 1. I get it. TP
And there's
number.
another one up at the
Yeah.
neck.
Yeah. Okay. I see him now. Sorry about that. I just didn't see him.
I didn't either.
Yeah. All right. Okay. And the reason why you didn't go with a traditional system besides the size
So a trench and stone system would take up, yeah, a lot more size. It's just really basically the size constraint.
But there were no other challenges other than size was the issue.
Well, the grading towards the lot line that we're requesting a variance for. If we do a
Go ahead.
if we do a traditional system, it would require a lot more grading as well, because it would be bigger than the chamber system.
Okay.
Chambers sometimes have a lower profile, which means
Yeah.
grading towards the lot, standard trench would be almost 15 inches tall. I think these
Yeah,
chambers
totally.
are max like 12, and depending on the size, they have a low profile, it's a little smaller, so.
Yeah, it looks like for this on the previous page of the drawing that the trench that they're going to be using is a 12-inch trench, and then they have a 12-inch cover over top of it. So I'm not understanding the engineer's statement about it requiring more grading other than it's a few feet longer. So yeah,
It'd be longer, and if we did a stone trench, it'd be a foot trench, and then the pipe was another 4 inches, and then 12 inches over that. So also it slopes, so you're also increasing the height there. So you're probably gaining half a foot to 3/4 of a foot in height that you wouldn't have to grade down from. Also, that would increase your breakout, requiring further grading pushed out from the system, not only in height.
okay.
So when you use one of these IA systems, the approval letters from the state state that you have to show that you could fit a conventional system in there. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's why the trench system was shown as a potential for that, but
Oh, no, and I know, I appreciate that, and that's why
Yeah.
that's there, and I totally get that and understand that. I was questioning why the choice, and, I'm like, oh, well, just grading, okay, then, but then the further explanation makes sense to me, so thank you.
Do we have any members in the, sorry, Kevin Baker? Muted.
So I'm curious why you're not requesting a groundwater offset.
We're able to meet the groundwater requirement. I suppose we're just trying to minimize the requested variances, because we could fit with making the groundwater requirement.
But if this thing were 2 feet lower, I mean, it wouldn't look like this.
Yeah, I see what you're
I'd
saying.
give it a shot, man. Before you build this,
they'd have to come back to the board with redesigned plans.
what's 2 weeks, you know? Are there wetlands?
No.
Motion to continue. No, I mean, you know, you did the right thing. I appreciate your work here. I think you should give it a shot with the 2 foot. That's just my personal.
We'll give you a second to think about that. Any members of the audience or abutters that would like to ask questions, raise your hand, please. Doesn't appear so. So I'll pitch it back to you, Matt. Would you like us to explore a motion on these plans, or would you like to take a look at another option that you'd bring back to us?
Can I just say something really quickly? Jim, if we approve this, does he still have the option to come back easily with a request for a groundwater offset reduction?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
All right. There you go. You don't have to
Thank you.
decide right now then.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance request for fill within 10 feet of a lot line.
Give that a second.
Now we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Your plan is approved, Matt. If you would like to make any changes, you can get on our agenda for the next meeting, August 9th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, 7:10 PM public hearings, 7-2-13 Air Road, continuance Brian Carlson. This is the sewer escrow account. Somebody from the audience, a part of our discussion.
I see the attorney for the property there.
Mr. Avini.
Yes, can you hear me now?
There we go. We can hear you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Attorney Jeffrey Avini, 6 Grove Ave, Leominster, Mass. I represent Traditional Concepts, Inc.
All right. Who wants to kick it off here?
I can set it up. I can set it up if you want, then.
It's up to you, Jim. That's fine.
Okay. So this site is on Air Road, 4 houses being built in the old sand pit there. It's a shared system. And so the board has approved the shared system, and that Title V covenant, easement covenant has been approved, and it's recorded on the property. One of the conditions of that covenant is that the owner provide the board with a financial mechanism to be able to replace the system in the event that it fails. And that financial mechanism in this case is taking the form of a sewer escrow account. They presented documents, I think on July 3rd. I looked at them quickly, sent them over to council to make sure that they, protected the homeowners and the town. Because one of the things that financial mechanism requires is that the town and the state are added beneficiaries. The language states that if the homeowners don't fix the system, the board can use the money to fix the system, or the state could. So that's built into that financial mechanism. Council, I think on Monday, I think he sent you a copy, Matt, stated that he felt that it was in order. So the system's approved. They're looking to get a certificate of compliance. This is one of the last things that needs to be signed and recorded so that certificate of compliance can be issued. So based on council's review and approval, I don't have an issue with it.
Just as a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, the escrow agreement doesn't get recorded. There's a declaration of trust which effectuates a homeowner's agreement. That gets recorded, that spells out how this is all going to work. So the escrow agreement is off record. The deck of trust is of record. So technically, Jim, the escrow agreement does not get recorded. The escrow agreement is going to be signed by the board, but it doesn't go to record.
Okay, because in the past, we've had them recorded, so they're in the chain of title.
It's not set up to be recorded, Jim, and I don't think it's been recorded before. The homeowners, just to clarify, Jim, the homeowner's declaration of trust establishes the HOA, references the escrow agreement.
Okay.
So that's usually the way they're tied together.
Okay. Let me check how we did it in the other one. So yeah.
I have a problem with that, as that it's just another, 6 pages to have it recorded when you go record the other information, attorney. So I don't understand the pushback not to have it recorded.
I don't think you've done it in the past, but if you want me to attach it to the homeowner's agreement,
I think that would be appropriate.
I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing, I looked at this really quickly, and Jim, you just brought up the point that the town and the state are beneficiaries. Is that correct?
The way the covenant describes it, they need to be additional beneficiaries.
Section 5 only lists 4 shares, and the particular beneficiaries, the town and the state is not listed as a beneficiary in section 5. Is that a problem?
I wonder if you have the most up-to-date one, because I believe the up-to-date one.
I only have what is involved in the meeting packet, so that's
Okay.
the only thing. can discuss.
Okay. And I don't have it up, so
Let me check. Let me see if I have it.
I hate to do an open meeting thing, guys, but if it's not in the packet,
I think you could still act on the document because that was the part of the open meeting part of it, approve the agreement. I'm just trying to say,
But-
like,
if the concern is that we need to make sure that the beneficiaries are there, then we need to see that before we, make a motion to, I have no problem being, showing this document. You know what I mean? I'll leave it up to the chair to make that call.
So
Just,
sorry. if I could, the last email I have, which was from this morning, that section is identical to what's in the packet.
So according to those things, does the state and the town need to be listed as a beneficiary?
they should be in there as a beneficiary.
no,
Don't
no,
forget,
no, what happens is it reverts back to the escrow agreement, which is the financing part of it.
Okay, so I'm not sure what document you're looking at, Kevin.
Right.
So it should be in the septic sewer escrow account
Right,
document, not the HOA.
right.
the declaration of trust establishing the blah, blah, blah road trust. Is that what we're looking at?
No, the sewer escrow account document.
Further down, escrow agreement,
Sorry,
page
I'll go. look at that.
46 of the packet.
Okay, give me a second.
So I think what you're looking for is page 49. There's a disbursement section too that lists the 7 to 13 year road trust, followed by the Littleton Board of Health and the Department of Environmental
Yeah.
Protection.
I see it there. Thank you.
Okay, phew.
No, all good. All
I
good.
thought, I thought there are a lot of those documents floating around. I just wanted to make sure.
No, all good. I was just following up and I'm like, I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Kevin Baker?
The only question I have, I guess it's more of a request, is that if the person in charge or the people in charge of the HOA change hands, that we would like to know who they are and what their contact information is.
I can address that.
Yeah.
The HOA has a self-operating provision where annually they're supposed to report to the board the status of the system. And in that document, you'll identify who the current trustees are and who the responsible parties are with the contact info. That's all kind of baked into the document.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else, Kevin Davis?
I'm all good. I don't have anything else. I was just looking at the beneficiaries because that was something that we had a problem with a previous document. So
Any questions from audience members? Please raise your hand. Nothing there.
Could I just, one additional thing? The document, the escrow agreement has a place for you all to sign. I don't know if you want me to kind of, I know they're under the gun about a family that needs to move in, whether you want me to sign on behalf of the board or whether you want me to kind of get around and get everyone to sign it, or just so they have the document to include with the HOA to record.
I would be available to sign it as early as tomorrow. Evan and Kevin,
I'm able.
I'm able to sign it the following Monday. I'm currently in New Hampshire right now.
I'm also okay with Jim signing on my behalf if
Yeah.
they.
Yeah, And I'm okay with that too, if he wants to sign on my behalf, if it's a timely issue.
Yeah, that'd be great. We are under a time constraint to get this family moved in. They've got a severely disabled child, so it's been a real test of time to get this put together.
There've been a lot of hurry ups for this facility.
Uh,
All right, very well. Then it sounds like Jim would be okay to sign it. Kevin Baker, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the escrow documents as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Approved. Jim, we'll get that signed off.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Next on the agenda, 7:20, public hearing, 234 Taylor Street, continue with Nicholas Satmary. And there he is.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I don't think it's a continuance.
I was reading the agenda. It says continued, but
I don't recall it being a continuance.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Nicholas Sadmary here from 234 Taylor Street.
Yeah, hold on for a second, please, sir.
yeah, one sec.
I don't recall this being continuance. They filed a motion. We had a motion on the table and it was denied. So this is not a continuance. This would be new business.
If I remember correctly, I think they came in, there were some concerns. I think you asked them to come back and report to the board, if that was my recollection.
We did, but there was also a motion on the table to accept it and for the
You're
variances.
thinking about the next one, Kev.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My fault. Thank you.
Yeah,
Withdrawn.
this is-
Everything
This is
withdrawn.
this is where
This is
Nick was going to
continued.
come and he was going to tell us they fixed everything and nobody's complained in the last 8 weeks.
This is a continuance.
Oh,
from
this is,
the
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
26th.
Pretty
I'm
close.
sorry. This is, yes. Now I remember.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I am totally corrected.
You're good.
All right.
Sorry, Nick.
No
My
problem. I was going to spark your memory there.
It's all good.
All right.
It is a continuance, and I'll now go back on mute like I should
Yeah.
be.
Jim, could you bring Kevin up to speed, please?
So, the last time we met, there were some concerns about odors at the facility. They were going to do some additional work, have somebody come and take a look at it. Since then, we've had one of the abutters who was actually filling us in on times where it was an issue. I hadn't heard from her in a while, so when I received a complaint from somebody else who mentioned that it hadn't been bad until just recently, there's a couple of bad days, I emailed her to say, hey, I haven't heard from you. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And she said, generally it has improved. So that's what I can report from you at this point in time, that it's, based on the two kind of data points. One of the persons mentioned that there had been some days recently where there was an odor issue. I haven't yet been able to speak to that person to follow up, but generally both of them said that it has vastly improved.
Okay. Nick, what can you tell us?
No, absolutely. I think Kevin Baker, you were correct in saying exactly what I was going to say. But no, we did do some improvements on the facility. We've also done an odor assessment. I have Michael Lannon here from Tech Environmental to speak on that assessment. I did forward that over to Jim. I forward that over to you. If you would like to, you could pass it along to the board and have everybody's email there.
Yep.
But in the short of it, basically they came in, they did an assessment. We've added some big carbon filters to the facility to scrub the envelope air of the facility. Another big part of that facility is it's supposed to be an all closed circuit facility. All the air is supposed to be kept in those grow rooms, the rooms that actually smell. And during the assessment, a couple months ago now, we recognized that some of our HVAC units they've been a little bit old, they needed some maintenance. Some of the seals on them went bad, and that was causing some fugitive odor. Once those were fixed, I've noticed a complete decrease in complaints. I haven't received any complaints. One of the neighbors, I even spoke to one of the neighbors right next door, Jim, the Yellow House. He said he had not smelt anything, and him and his wife. And now, so we did the carbon filters, we fixed those units, and now we are going to be potentially expanding the building. So we have some plans during that expansion to do some further work on our odor mitigation system, basically adding more carbon filtration to the actual pressurization system of the building. And we're going to be putting that into a spot where it's easily accessible to be changed out, to be maintenance. That way we know where it is. But we have done some work. We've definitely identified a couple issues and fixed that. And, like Jim had mentioned, we have nothing there. I had myself and some of the team go through the N-butanol test, which Michael can speak more on if you'd like to. But basically, it's on the assessment, and on a daily, we'll go walk around the facility a couple times and do that test, record. They've also come out and done that and recorded, and we've been finding on the scale, it's I believe a 1 to 5, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, and we've been getting a less than 1 on the odor scale around the building. Multiple different weather, different days, different times of day, and so all in all, I think we've improved a lot.
Good. Thank you for the update.
Absolutely.
Mr. Lannon, did you want to add any detail?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing that we noticed when we were at the last meeting, Kevin, I know we were in another meeting. I don't know if it's a continuance for this one or not, but we're good. Anyway, we had come out and looked at the facility and said we couldn't tell whether it was more or less than before. And I think what it came down to was that the air goes outside into these very large HVAC units. They all have access panels that have pressurized seals on them, but the seals are rubber type seals, and those are just aged, and they weren't fully sealing. So they fixed that, and then the other thing was the condensate that really has the odor as the cycle gets near the end. That was not necessarily getting back as quickly as possible to the recycle room because just the tubing had more particulate and stuff built up in it. So it's some of the odor maintenance activities, and we went over that with some of them. What Nick was referring to with the odor scale was that we had them come to our office and we screened the people that were going to monitor odor, because one of the best things they can do is be proactive, right? So we wanted them to go out there and do this when they get there, not after they've been in the grow room for a few hours, but when they get there, they can go around, check it out, see if there's something like this is happening, so they can identify it, frankly, before the neighbors do. And that's the plan going forward. And when we were done, we realized that the interesting thing is when we looked at this in 2019, they were not at the same level of production they are now. They're maxed out for production. They can't make any more product than what they're doing now. The building that they're going for to supplement this is to actually provide more of the ancillary things, the processing, storing of equipment and things, just to make it even more tighter, because what it'll do is it'll allow them to open and close the doors less often, and that's the goal. And then that last thing is in the new design, a carbon system to help treat the area in the hallways before it's exhausted. That's key. So that will help minimize some of the very minimal fugitive odors that are probably getting out of there now. One of the things we explored was the office area, because the office area just has regular HVAC. It doesn't have odor control in it. And they put it in an air curtain to separate the spaces. But one of the things, as you see over time is they have a lot more workers there. That's good. More people employed, right? But the problem with that is there's more people changing their clothes in the office area, so the clothes themselves have some odor. So they're installing a carbon system in there, which will help with that, keeping that level down as well. So they're making some improvements. The report that we had sent over to Nick that I believe he provided to you, which you probably haven't read because it came over today, but essentially we found that it's now the same or less than it was in 2019. And with this new addition that they proposed and the new systems that we're talking about, it will be even better going forward. The primary reason for those complaints that had occurred back in April and May was related to the gaskets being worn out. They just weren't as tight. You walked over to some of the systems, you could literally hear this hiss of it coming out, yet they're clamped in. So they should be tight with the gasket. The gaskets just, they weather with the sunlight and so on. And then again with the pumping. So once those two things were done, that's when we did our assessment again, and we determined that it's the same or less than before, and we'll continue to improve. That's pretty much it for me.
Sounds good. Thank you for the detail. Questions from the board? Kevin Baker?
No questions. Thanks for being proactive on it.
Kevin Davis?
I'd actually like to hear from the audience. We have 2 hands raised. And then I'll say my piece.
Mr. Mackey, I'm going to lower your hand, but you can raise it again. I know it's been up for a while. I just want to make sure it's pertaining to this. But first, I will go to Vin Bertolino.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Yep, Vin Bertolino. You almost got it right. I'm on Crane Road, Littleton, Mass. So just a little background. I've been dealing with this for about 5 years. Talked to Nick a number of times, talked to Jim a number of times, and been helping to monitor, sending emails to Jim. So a couple of concerns there. I heard Kevin, you were aghast at 2 months to resolve a problem earlier on one of the earlier issues. This has been going on 5 years. I wouldn't call that proactive. I think Jim has done a great job here recently in pushing on this, and I appreciate that, Jim. But I still haven't seen this rectified fully and completely. I've heard the HVAC solution before. I heard it was a shift change. I heard dock doors were open, et cetera, et cetera. I heard that it's snowing out. And so I think it sounds to me like we're playing whack-a-mole. And maybe we found an issue with seals, but I didn't hear anything about the dock doors and how we're maintaining any kind of discipline around that, or airlocking it, or having some kind of keyed system so you have to close the door before you open the others, or evacuate the dock area, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we get to where we have some confidence that this is fully resolved? That would be my question to the board, to Jim, and to the facility.
Thank you. Kevin Baker?
Mr. Bertolino, are you saying that you feel that the odor has not improved?
No, I've commented to Jim via email that I did notice an improvement here recently since he's been pushing on things. However, there are still days where we have issues. This morning was one, in fact. Jim, I think you were referring to my email earlier.
Yours is one.
Yeah. So you have to understand I'm in one direction from the facility. So I can't really give you a full picture. I might have a good day. Somebody else has a bad day on the other side. There's about, let's see, I counted up, there's 80, I think it was 80 abutters you notified in Littleton, over 100 in Boxborough. And I'm sure that the airflow doesn't stop once it hits the boundary of the abutters. So there's a lot of people being impacted by this. It's a quality of life issue. It's, there's a lot of other issues too, but from a health department point of view, I think, quality of life is probably the main focus.
Well, thank you
It's
for,
a nuisance for you. We understand.
For hundreds of people that live in this area. Or hundreds of houses, I should say, probably thousands of people.
thank you for providing some.
It's a
firsthand
5-year
information.
project. And, you know, if we're interested in resolving things in less than a couple of months here, then we're a little over. And, you know, I tried working with the facility. You know, they stopped picking up the phone when I got Jim involved. So if you ask me, I'm not sure we're putting our best foot forward on this.
All right, thank you. We're gonna go to one other audience member, if I could, who wanted to ask. Thomas Mackey.
Thomas is actually with us,
Oh,
your board. Yep. He's
hand
one of our,
raised.
he's
Well,
one of our attorneys.
Thomas, did you have anything you wanted to say specifically? Apparently not. Michael Lannon, your hand is up. Did you need to say something else?
Yes, I'd just like to answer some of the questions that the neighbor had with respect to the doors and airlocks. Those have been addressed. I didn't want to spend a lot of time today talking about the good parts of the things. I think we're trying to focus on what still needs to be done. But relative to the airlocks, they have put in air curtains in 3 locations. 2 of those locations are at doors that go to areas where then there are garage doors. And then within those garage doors, there are high-speed doors that are also installed. One of the rooms, the water room, that garage door is not used much at all. So that's really not a concern, but they still put a high-speed door on that. The other area is the loading dock area, which does have, is opened at times. The loading dock area now has a high-speed door that can go up and down when the garage door is not, is being used, is up. It also has an air curtain so that when the process door is opened to the main hallway, the odor from that is knocked down because of the velocity of the curtain, keeps the odor from traveling out. It's not 100% effective, which again is why we recommended the carbon absorption systems in the hallways. And that's what they're doing. They're putting 2 of those in. And last time I was at the site, they were not in yet, but they were going in the 2 hallways, one on each side, and then the one in the front area that we discussed. So those are new things. The other thing is there's a system within the loading dock area that can condition the air there. And there is a particulate filter in there, and Nick and I were discussing the potential to add another tray of carbon in there to help with that as well. Most of the time, the air within the loading dock is not that odorous as long as we're keeping fugitives from coming out of there. But then again, there are times when there's a large amount of product that might be in there in the process of being shipped. And at that time is when you'd want to make sure you're running that. So that's something that's another improvement that's planned for going forward. I do not agree with the neighbor's assessment that this is a particular nuisance at this time. I do a lot of review of these facilities for neighborhoods, for boards of health throughout the Commonwealth. And the goal is not to be non-odorous, but the goal is to not be something that is considered a nuisance, as in it changes your perception. I do believe that the facility can do better, primarily by making sure that they are positively pressurizing the grow rooms. They are negatively evacuating the hallways. And so to make sure that there's another system on that, which is what will be added as part of this expansion, that will help knock it down even more. And that's the goal, is to knock it down. We want to have multiple days in a row where nobody notices the facility. That's the goal. That's what we're striving for.
So I'm sure frustration is felt on everybody's side. You guys don't want to keep trying to figure out why there's a problem, and the local residents don't want to keep feeling like there's an impact. Odor, it's hard to measure and hard to evaluate. Like you kind of pointed out, it's what is a nuisance? People are going to have a different definition. Some people are going to be okay with it sooner than others. But it doesn't feel like we've totally closed things down. Before we continue, Jim, what further steps or what recommendations would you have? We've obviously continued this from April, so 3 months ago. And like I said, I don't feel like we're resolved, but what do you think the path forward could look like?
So again, based on the complaints that I was receiving, and I drive by the site probably 2 or 3 times a week just in transit, and I haven't noticed anything, and it's been pretty humid. And those are days that we've had issues in the past, rainy weather, humid weather. I guess I'd want to maybe after the meeting talk to Mr. Bertolino and find out where he's experiencing the odors and when, so I can see if there's a particular time that I can go by and see if I'm experiencing the same thing. The air pollution regulations, talk about, I think I mentioned in our earlier meeting, it's a pretty broad definition of what a potentially a condition of air pollution is, the regs. And it's measured at the property lines, and it's, one of the lines in there is, causing someone, deprivation of the normal enjoyment of their property kind of language. So, again, and it's a matter of intensity and frequency. I mean, if it happens once and, every once in a while, would you consider that frequent enough to rise to the level of condition of air pollution? I don't think in a reasonable way I would. If it's happening, regularly, that probably is something that the board would need to take a look at.
Kevin Baker. You're muted.
This question's for Mr. Lannon through the chair. Is there a way to monitor the positive pressure in the grow area and the negative pressure in the other space to make sure it's optimal at all times?
Yes, there is.
And do you track that?
Yes, that is something that should be done once this new system is done. Really, the issue is not the positive pressure, but the negative pressure part needs to be better evaluated with the newer system. I think the original carbon system that was installed in the headspace up through the roof was inadequate. It was too small. It would be consumed right away. And that is what needs to be replaced by something that someone can monitor down at the ground level within the new building in a location where someone can see it. And you're absolutely right. There can be pressure gauges on that. People can see that and make sure that the most important thing, Kevin, honestly, is not the positive pressure within the grow rooms. That's something they want to prevent, bacteria and disease from getting into their product. What we care about as residents and as the neighbor and as the town is the negative pressure outside of those grow rooms. That's what really needs to be monitored. There isn't a good way to do that now, but that will be incorporated in the design that's going in to these improvements going forward.
Why can't we do it now so we make sure we get it right for when the bigger, newer building's coming?
It's not a bigger, newer building. It's a separate building that's going to have room for a newer odor control system. But Nick, you want to say something? Go ahead, please.
Is it okay if I step in real quick?
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
building management system that we have in there is pretty in depth. We are completely monitoring that pressurization in there. It's, I forgot the actual form of measurement that it is, but it is measured right on my computer. It alarms if it goes out of a certain set point. But it's all totally automatic. And there's actually graphs on that I could see if it ever goes out. That never goes out of whack. So, you know, I'll have humidities and temperatures in the grow room go out of set point. They alarm, notifies me on my phone. But that system never goes out of alarm. We already have sensors within that building monitoring that. So it is already being monitored.
Does it need to be set a little tighter if the negative pressure potentially is the thing that's kicking off the exterior odor?
I'm gonna go ahead and say that that's not the issue that we're seeing. I'm not seeing the pressurization in the system being the culprit at all within that building. Just because that system is controlled very tightly already. Again, being more filtration within that building, more air scrubbing within that building will help that. But I do not personally see that being the issue.
I think what we've had is we've had fugitive emissions that have come from those gaskets and things that have been addressed. And then we have fugitive emissions that are coming from the exhaust that needs to be better controlled. And that means it needs a newer system with more carbon, because a lot of the cannabis industry has put in these little carbon systems that were made for like some guy when he was growing it when it was illegal in their garage, and they just made them a little bigger, right? That's not what you need. This is an industrial operation. You need something that you would use in the food industry, or something that, you know, we've applied to the solid waste industry to scrub that, so that, because carbon has a finite life. So we want to make sure that the life is long enough so that it continues to have adequate removal rate over the life cycle of the system. We typically recommend you change it out at 80%. Well, those little canisters, 80% could be a couple of weeks to a month. And that's, I think, been the main issue initially with the first design. And that's why they want to shift to something else going forward.
So let me interject here real quick, if I may. So what it sounds like right now is that we have a maintenance issue, that we're not maintaining the system adequately enough. We have monitoring that's currently going on in the system, but it's not reporting out to interested parties, right? One of the things that might be interesting, Nick and Michael and Thomas, is to think about a dashboard that residents could go to that may be able to see some of this data, have it as a read-only dashboard. I don't know if that's possible, but that would certainly aid in maybe some of the towns and neighbors, looking at things. One of the questions that I had is, with all the PM 2.5 particulate that's coming down from Canada, and one of the papers, several of the papers that I read, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but when you have particulate and humidity in the air, as we've had these this summer, we should have had a stronger smell sometimes. Is that true, or am I not reading those scientific papers correctly?
I think that is a possibility, but there are a lot of variables in there. So it really becomes very site specific. A lot of it has to do with topography, how long you're exposed, a lot of the things that Jim was talking about, frequency, duration, and,
Yep.
and intensity and so on. So I think the answer is yes globally, but I don't know if that really is what is affecting here. I
Sure.
think this is more related to it. We had the issues with the gaskets and the condensate. That reminded the neighbors again, because the level went up. And that's just the natural reaction then, is to be more focused on it. And now the only way to fix that is we've got to go down lower than we were before, so that
Yep.
it satisfies their concerns. So one of the ways to do that was immediately installing these carbon systems in the hallways. And that's what's happening. Nick was getting them from another facility in New Hampshire, so they didn't even have to order them. Those are the ones that you have to keep changing the cartridges on and so on. That's great for now, but what we really need is to put in the system that's going to work for weeks to months at a time, and then you change it out. And I like your idea of the dashboard when we get to that, because I think I'd even take it a step further, Kevin, and say, you want the dashboard, and then you want what I like to see, which is my idiot gauges. The little pressure gauge right on the side that you can see it's working, right? Never mind all the computers and everything. That's a nice thing too. So I think both of those would be good once we get to the point where we have this new system that's really the overall system. It's been somewhat, to use Vic's term, a whack-a-mole, because we've been doing little things here and there to address it. We need this system for the whole facility, and that can be the one on the dashboard, Kevin. I agree with you on that.
The other thing to think about too is also maybe an interactive system that can be there that, and I don't know quite how to do this yet, but it's something, think of it like, you know, when you go through the bathrooms at Logan Airport, they've got a little screen on it that's got a happy face, a flat face, and a frown face. That maybe if people log in or you approve people to log in, that neighbors that can report, that's something that Jim can see if he wants to look at it, you know, something like that, that, you know, it allows you to take a pulse of what's happening around. You know, I don't know.
I mean, I think the long-term goal is to get to where people are only complaining when it really is noticeable and a problem. That's we don't want people to have to be rating it all the time. We want them to have, you know, enjoy their lives. They don't want to deal with this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But if the people, if they're neighbors that are willing to interact and to give you feedback, that might be something that, you know, you think about with this new system. I'm not saying it's a requirement, I'm not saying any of that stuff. It's just spitballing ideas to try to, you know, come up and have a way to interact with the public.
Okay.
Absolutely. Good recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what Kevin's getting at is there's a difference between having a complaint box and having a regular stream of data input. And so
Right.
even if you threw the net out and found, you know, a small number, 10 people who are like, hey, I wouldn't mind helping you out. Yes, I can tell it on certain days. I'll try to go in every single day and tell you whether it's red, yellow, or green based upon my perception. I think that's a different data set than having something, which I think we talked about the last meeting, which is there a way for somebody to complain really quickly and really easily so that you get notified almost in real time if there's a problem? Both systems have their benefits. You could have both. One potentially is a wider net, because if you have 100 people that all went on your page today and click that button that there's a problem, that's a different input than somebody who's kind of monitoring over time. I think those are good ideas. I don't think those are necessarily something that we can require, but I appreciate your considering that. I would like to ask, you've kind of alluded to the not expansion. I think Kevin said expansion, you corrected and said it's a new building. So new buildings, new systems. I'm hearing a lot of that. What can you give me 5 minutes of how a new separate building, which I assume is creating its own odors? No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Then give me a 5 minute of what this new building is and how it's going to help the problem.
Basically the new building, the expansion on the building is just for storage. You know, I just need storage. So, you know, it's not for any grow or anything like that. It's not going to be contributing to the odor at all. Literally just for storage. And when we do expand the building, that's going to give us the opportunity to not only utilize different parts of the building for entrances, exits, right? But also to use the HVAC while we're there to the back of the building and create a system where we could easily monitor what those units are doing, what those carbon filtration, have them on the ground and not up in the ceiling, right? So basically pull that down into the new building and have it there for us to monitor. So basically, in the short of it, sorry, it's not 5 minutes, but really just storage building, new HVAC, and adding that system onto it so that we can better fix it if needed. And
I'll fill out another minute of the 5 minutes, but no more. And that is that what I noticed was that there's so much stuff in the hallways, Matt, that they're opening and closing the doors and then they're trying to get stuff over here and then moving things around. And just having that so much more efficient, having all these racks and things in another location and a location for the carbon system, it's going to allow the doors and stuff to be open and closed much less frequently because we want it to be as enclosed as possible. That's sort of the first line of odor control. And then the next one is the new system that will go in as part of this too. But that's really, I noticed it when I was there from the first time when I was there in 19 to now, that there's just so much more equipment. And I think, honestly, they've gotten much better at keeping the capture down, but they've also gone up to maximum capacity because that was always the goal. Now that they're at max capacity, they need these other ancillary areas to make sure that they can be as most efficient as possible, especially with odor control.
Okay, so new systems are going in for sure. And what is the timeline for that?
I believe we have a meeting on August 3rd for that expansion for approval. And hopefully it's approved. And then I figured the build out, it's going to be, 8 months to a year for the build out.
But at the same time, Nick, relative to odor control, you're installing these carbon systems right now that are inside the building.
Yep,
Right.
yep, they're being installed. One was already installed, and I want to just mention that they are the industrial systems with the free carbon in them. They're not the canisters. These are the big ones. These are the industrial.
Right. And I think the goal for any odor control system, Matt, in my mind, is you want to try to go with the odor seasons, right? So when he says 8 to 12 months, anything they're doing in a new build out, you'd want to try to push the odor control part of whatever that build is. So by, next Memorial Day, there's something in place that really makes sure that things are up to snuff relative to that, as opposed to everything that's going to be done in that building over the next year. I think that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to work with them is making sure we push that part of it forward.
I was going to say, based on the comments that we've received from our neighbors and other people, I would think the odor control should be far left as possible.
Yes. As far left on the Gantt chart as possible.
Kevin Baker.
So Nick, you guys mentioned you're installing the industrial carbon filters now. How many are being installed?
It's going to be 3.
And one has been installed?
Yes.
When are the other 2 going to be installed?
Within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, so if those are installed in 2 weeks, and it's probably going to be, pretty humid, at least for the next 6 weeks, at least taking us into the fall time. So, it might make sense to have all 3 carbon filters running, up and running for a couple weeks, maybe before we talk to the neighbors again and see what the status is of any potential odor complaints at that time. I mean, does that make sense that like the odor mitigation is like happening now and in the next 2 weeks, and that it makes sense that there's still complaints happening because you're not done with fixing it?
That, I would say that what we've done and given the tests that we've done.
Yeah, you've done great stuff, but we're not completely 100% done with everything we could possibly do.
Exactly.
Until these other 2 filters are installed in the next 2 weeks.
Yep, at the moment.
So if we see you again in 6 weeks and we talk to abutters and we talk to neighbors, and then we really take an account of what's happening at that point, we'll have a better picture of what's going on.
That'd be more accurate. Yeah.
Right. I'll make a motion to continue this for another 6 weeks.
6 weeks puts us at September 13th.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. Sorry, neighbor.
I will be in France then. So,
Oh, good for you.
Yep,
Yeah.
sounds great.
I'm sure you can figure out what time our meeting is.
It is a Zoom meeting, I guess.
See you at 3 a.m.
It's working for Kevin in New Hampshire, so.
And the previous meeting, I was in Salt Lake City on a business trip and got released to go do the meeting. So all
We
good.
have a motion
And a second.
and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. See you in 6 weeks. Hear from you sooner with some data, please.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen.
You.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I really do love the fact that and it's Zoom meeting, I can dial in remotely. This is really helping out. So
We're glad to. Next on the agenda, the 7:30 public hearing for One Monarch Drive. It says this is a continuance, but as Kevin Davis pointed out, this is not a continuance, I don't believe. So public hearing, One Monarch Drive, Steve Gallagher of EMD Company's request for sewage local upgrade approval. There is Steve Gallagher. We can't hear you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Name
Great.
and address for the record, please.
Steve Gallagher, VMD Companies, 733 Turnpike Drive, Andover, and we're here for 1 and 2 Monarch Drive in Littleton. And I would actually ask that Sue Carter and Pat Burke of Places be admitted as well so they can view the project.
Tempted?
Great. So I'll turn it over to Sue.
Kevin Baker.
Before Sue gets started, I don't think we actually had a chance to hear from Jim on this yet. So I would please ask that we start with Mr. Gariffi.
Sounds good. Jim wasn't here for our last discussion. I appreciate that. So Jim, can you kick us off?
So after your last meeting, spoken with Pat Burke a number of times, reviewed some plans, made a list of things that needed to be done, have received some of that information. So I'm curious to hear what Sue and Pat have to say this evening.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, please.
could I share the screen, please?
You should be able to, I believe.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had your permission.
You betcha.
Okay. Are you seeing my screen too now?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, let me go back just a bit. My name is Sue Carter. I'm a professional engineer and I am from Places Associates. The board saw me back in February and again in March when we discussed some of the issues for this site. Just for orientation, here is Monarch Drive. Here is the existing building at 1 Monarch Drive. Back in February, we came in and the first discussion we had with the board was to allow the septic system for the building on Lot 1 to be located on Lot 2. And at that time, the board granted us the variance to allow that. When we came back in March, it was for an intermediate system to allow us to scale back on the existing leaching areas for Lot 1 based on the water meter readings. Tonight, what we are here for is, this is very similar to what you saw 2 weeks ago, is that we have done more work on here. Some of the changes that occurred are, we had some soil testing done in the area of the existing septic tanks so we could determine the groundwater elevation. And we determined that we needed a local approval authority waiver to allow us to have less than a foot above the water table to the inlet into the STAR system. For the big picture review, if you recall, the building on Lot 1 was built in 1986. And this is the plan from 1986. The septic tank and pump chamber were very deep and they pumped to the existing leaching field. The system is almost 40 years old. and most likely was getting close to being at the end of its lifespan, which is why we're proposing a new system here. This system includes a Presby leaching facility, leaching area, as well as what we're proposing is the Septic Tech Star system, which allows us to pre-treat and get nitrogen removal. Our hands are somewhat tied on this site by the elevations of the existing septic system. When Pat met with you 2 weeks ago, we had determined the groundwater elevation, but we had not been able to determine the elevations of the existing tank. We've done that in the meantime so that we know that it's a little bit lower than what the original as-built plan had shown. Our elevation for the coming out of the existing tank is 224.7. The previous one had said it was about 224.75. So we're a little bit lower. We have groundwater at 223.61. So as we come into the Septic Tech first tank, we would be at elevation 223.70, or about an inch above the water table. Now, for this system, all these tanks are watertight, and that's by the manufacturer for this package plant for nitrogen removal. They have rubber gaskets coming in, and the biggest difference between this system and your average pump chamber for whether it's residential or another commercial site is because we're using the Septic Tech system, it will be monitored and maintained. So if anything occurred and there was any groundwater seepage, it would be noticed and they would have the opportunity to address it right off because it would affect the treatment of the effluent in these two tanks. So what we are asking the board for tonight is a waiver, local approval authority to allow a 1 inch separation between the invert into this septic tank, 1 inch above the groundwater, and to have more than 3 feet of cover over the tanks. Here we go. Over the new septic tech tanks, we will have 4.6 feet above tank 1 and approximately 4.7 feet above tank 2. Title 5 allows the local Board of Health to give local approving if it's less than 6 feet. So we are here tonight to ask the board to reconsider the vote from 2 weeks ago for these two variances. Stepping back and looking at it, one of the issues we have here is the existing building is already in place. We've tried to find more information about what the invert out of the building is. And it appears that the cleanouts that would normally be in the floor may have been tiled over or carpeted over. We were unable to find them. So we were able to do some measure downs within the existing tank. In this case, it's an existing tank and the plumbing is geared towards that tank. In my estimation, if we could say the slope out of the tank, out of the building was 5% instead of 2%, we'd pick up a matter of a couple of inches. And that doesn't really help us with a lot on that site. The other thing is, if you notice the proximity of the tank to the building, let me get to that. That tank is very deep, and to be able to excavate and lift that tank or replace it with a new tank for a matter of a couple of inches would put the foundation in jeopardy because it would put the excavation, and remember in sand and gravel with water, we've got to grade it back to at least a 2-to-1 for it to be safe to work in. It would be in the zone of influence for the foundation. So that does not appear to be a viable alternative. So we are asking the board for these 2 local approval authority approvals. We feel that the net result is a much better environmental system than what is currently there. It will have the pre-treatment as required by Title V for being in a Zone 2 for public water supply, as well as the leaching field will be one of the new Presby systems, which in and of itself provides more treatment of the effluent than just a traditional pressure or dosing septic system. So if the board has any comments, I'd be happy to answer that. I don't know if you want me to keep the plans up on the screen so we can talk about it, or if you want me to stop sharing.
Why don't you just keep them up there for now, and
Okay.
if the question
That
comes
sounds
up,
good.
then we can zoom around for us.
Okay.
I want to go back to Jim first because he said specifically wanted to see if there was new information. So, Jim, where are you now with what you've just heard? Muted.
So the information that Sue mentioned, that information I do have. I think we're waiting for some minor things like they had the existing septic tank inspected, looking for the inspection report, and that the plans are essentially ready to go. And so these are really the last couple of things. Again, you're stuck with an existing tank and existing pitch out of that tank into the new tanks. The system, as Sue mentioned, will be monitored. So the approval from DEP on this septic tech is that at least quarterly it needs to be monitored. So it'll have eyes on it from time to time. So it's one way to make sure that if there is a leak, that leak can be caught rather soon enough. One other thing I will say, the section of Title V that describes the offset to outlets to groundwater mentions that if you have soil evaluation, Paul, which we do now in the area of tanks, you can be as close as an inch, believe it or not, to the water. So supported by rigs.
Thank you for that, Jim. Around the board, Kevin Baker.
Jim, I'm curious why they can't. I know why they can't change the elevation of the sewer pipe out of the building. I'm curious why that old tank can't be abandoned. A suite put in to go around it or above it or whatever, and put a new tank in at an elevation that keeps us out of the water table in this industrial complex in a very highly sensitive, wetland vegetation area.
So unfortunately, what you have is a pipe coming out of the building at a certain elevation. And as Sue mentioned, even if you were to be able to pick up an inch or two, you still have to kind of go with that elevation coming out of the building. And that's the thing. Go ahead.
Is there a tank that has an inlet in a different location?
Nope. So usually there's a couple of inches drop, which Title V requires between the inlet and the outlet. So if they have the outlet elevation, the inlet's probably just a couple inches higher. And so you're not gaining a lot, but potentially you're risking the integrity of the building.
So if that tank were abandoned and a new one brought in at an elevation that worked better for the water table, that's not possible.
The problem they have, as Sue mentioned, they can't really determine, because the cleanout may be tiled over, where that pipe is coming out, whether that pipe can actually come up any. And so if you put a new tank and you'd be putting it in, having to meet the elevation of the pipe coming out of the building as it is now, and they know what the outlet of that pipe is because they know what the outlet of the tank is. And it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of space to come up, even if you could put another tank. And the further you get out from the building, all of a sudden now you need to maintain pitch on that pipe. So that tank starts to creep down into the ground a little bit as you're trying to meet pitch on the pipe getting to the tank.
And Sue, these are the prints from the 80s that you're showing right now.
Right. This is what I'm showing right now is the as-built plan.
Yeah.
And if you see the invert in the tank is 22501.
Yep.
So take off the 2 inches the 3 inches, and that will put us to 224.76.
Yep.
And the elevation we shot the other day was 224.70. So our numbers, today's numbers, are pretty much totally in line with the as-built plans. And interesting, looking at this, seeing that they gave a top of a tank elevation, my gut reaction is I think they installed all the tanks before they brought in the fill for the building, which is why they might not have cared that it was so deep in relationship to where the foundation is. But that, I think Jim summarized our concern exactly, that we may not gain more. You know, at one point I looked to see if we could move it further away and just, you know, pipe through the existing tank. That's not the 2% grade from the building to the septic tank has to be a 2% grade, and that actually puts us even lower as it gets to the water table.
And what's the sorry, may I?
Oh, I'm all set. Any questions? I'm happy to
Go
answer.
ahead, Kevin Baker.
What's the major obstacle in finding the actual location of the pipe and where it goes now?
Well, in terms of, as it relates to the building, is that typically we see a clean out outside the building, and they have gone all through there and cannot find it. We had hoped that maybe there's a clean out, you know, like you usually will see just the PVC with a screw top in it as a clean out. They were unable to find it. They found one, but it was not to the septic tank. I'm guessing it might have been to the grease trap, but I did not see it, so I'm not sure. What I did was I backtracked and said, you know, if we went 5% instead of 2%, how much would that gain us? And that's where, you know, thinking that if it came out 5% now and we dropped it to 2%, how much would we gain? And we're really talking inches because the tank is so close to the building. And the building is obviously slab on grade, so it's not like we can easily go in a crawl space and try to find it like you might in a house or other commercial buildings. I do know their cafeteria is on the back side of the building. I have no idea what's happening with the plumbing. The current building owners were not the same as those who developed the building, so they have no information on the elevation of that pipe coming out of the building.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would just answer all the questions if we could figure that out.
You know, and then we also talked about, because these tanks are so deep, it's considered a confined space. So they would have to shut down the building and pump it out and then vent it to be able to go in it. So I stepped back and said, well, if we could do that, what does that solve for us? We know the invert in and out of the tank. It's pretty consistent with the as-built. Like I said, it'd be a matter of inches. If we put a parallel tank to that and set it aside, we have the potential for a longer run getting to the invert into the septic tank, which at a 2% grade is going to drop us even lower. We've got a 1% grade going to the new septic tank because it's after the septic tank. We're allowed to go a 1%. So every option we tried, I was running the numbers backwards and forwards, and we weren't gaining enough to make a significant change. I think the key thing here to keep in mind is that this tank, these new tanks are a treatment, will be much better environmentally for treatment of the effluent, and they are watertight with the gasketed boots, and it will be monitored, and it will have regular maintenance and inspections. And I think that's a huge advantage over some of the other sites that may have gone to a 1-inch, and potentially the systems that DEP contemplated when they said you could have a 1-inch. If this were new construction, I would say absolutely I'd raise that tank higher. But because we're dealing with that existing building and existing tank and too much digging around that building, we don't want to do that because of the sand and gravel soils with a relatively high water table. Those are big tanks and they're deep. So if we were to try to pull that tank out, we've got a potentially unstable hole, and that's our concern.
Sue,
I think
you're
the
so,
key
you're
thing
so
is,
good,
you know,
Sue.
gain a lot.
You're so good at what you do. I just want to tell you that.
Oh, thank you. I tried to solve it. I really did. And we kept hitting dead ends.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gavin Davis, anything from you?
No, it's a very challenging site. We knew it was a challenging site from the previous presentations and things like that, and so I really appreciate it. I also appreciate the engineering effort to try to solve the problem and see if there's something else that's going on. The comment I made the last time was to see if there was any way that town would be able to have another professional engineer review this. No offense to anybody else. Matt Wason, did we hear anything back from the town before Dan left?
I don't have anything, and I'm not aware if Dan asked for a review.
Okay, probably because we turned down the request.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address that,
Yes, please.
the VMD who's developing Lot 2 has been working with the owners of Lot 1. Lot 1 is very concerned and wanted to make sure that they had their own engineer looking out for their own best interest.
Yep.
So we had Zenith Engineering, Jamie Bissonette, who is familiar with these septic star systems and is a professional engineer in Massachusetts who designs these as often as anybody. He has reviewed it. I got the final email tonight saying that we'd addressed all his concerns. If that helps the board have a higher level of confidence, we can have him get you a letter stating that he's been involved and has been reviewing and that we've addressed his concerns.
Certainly that goes some way towards it. My concern with that was that last time that when we did this, it was stated that there were multiple reviews and multiple professional engineers and all that other kind of good stuff. So I appreciate that, but there's that line has been used the last time. So while I'm not discounting their profession or tradecraft or that person's expertise at all, that line was already used. So and it's no reflection on anybody here, but it's just, it is what it is.
If I could explain some of the revisions going back and forth, some of the discussions were on the expansion area, what Jim asked us to show. Some of it was time to learn. For Jim is probably the most educated Board of Health agent that I'm aware of for these septic tech systems. We also went out and we had them, they did GPR, the ground penetrating radar,
Yep.
to find where all the electric lines and other lines were out there. So
Yep.
we had shifted the tank configuration to avoid a major electric line going through there.
Yeah.
So to say there were a lot of changes and back and forth, some of them were because we got new information and we adjusted for that. Jim asked us to do another perk test in the expansion area. We did that. So that was a revised plan because we added more information to it. So some of it is a case of it's a big system, and to make sure that he had the comfort level with testing and other things. One of the latest things, as you're aware, back on July 7th was the date that we went out and we did a test hole near where these tanks are going. And that's where we determined groundwater is at elevation 223.61. Things like that. It's a large system. And I understand as Jim got into it more, he had other questions and we've tried to be addressing it.
Yeah.
It's not our run of the mill. We have 3 50-foot long trenches, 2x2 with vents, and we're good to go. This is a more complex system, and everyone has given it a high level of review. I know Jim's talked to DEP to ask about the septic tech and to get more details on that. So it's not that there's a lot of back and forth because nobody knew what they were doing. It was as we got into it, the question arose and we addressed it.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Okay, I'll go back to Jim. This is obviously a very complicated system and layout and design. What would be your official recommendation for this board?
So again, to Sue's point about the treatment, so what you're getting is a septic tank pump chamber system that went to a straight leach field, and now you're getting a septic tank going to a treatment system that'll reduce the wastewater strength and the nitrogen, going to a Presby system, which is in and of itself meant to be a treatment system. So I think the design is far better than obviously the 1988 design. Take into account the full flow. They can put a reserve area in there, so it's as close to fully compliant as it can be. Nitrogen treatment can be challenging, and so making sure that that system could actually handle the wastewater flow, that was some of the back and forth with DEP. Some of it was just semantics, which is maddening sometimes, but just to make sure that when tank components were put on plans, that they matched the DEP's certification letter. So again, that was probably one of the most maddening pieces of this. So again, because it'll be monitored, that little bit of groundwater concern, somebody can watch for that. But the rest of it, I think, is a good system for the site.
All right, thank you, Jim. I just had one clarification, Sue, for the offset between the groundwater and inlet. You're asking for us to kind of go down to an inch, that an inch is possible. We are like really close to 1 inch, correct?
Correct.
And I guess the question is, are any of those fractions of measurements going to change and we end up at 0?
No, actually, I would like to show you what the, if I can find it. Wait a minute. I can have your patience. Somewhere on the previous design plans, when we're looking in greater detail, it looks like they called the water table at the building slightly lower. And I think we have the advantage of this year, because of all the rain we've had in July. I think if anything, it's likely to be lower rather than higher. And the sand and gravel soils, everything in there is probably as high as you're going to see on a steady basis. So I don't, oh, there it is. I can see the water table right there. And Pat, you had calculated what that elevation was. Do you remember what it was from the existing design plan for the groundwater? Oh, Pat's probably, if you could unmute Pat so he could reply. I'm sorry.
Yes, they had the previous groundwater was 223.2 before, so they actually were lower than what we had.
If that helps you have a level of confidence that it's not going to be, higher based on what was there historically.
Yeah, we've certainly had a lot of water come in, Matt. Just at my house over the last month, we've had 12 inches of rain. So
Yeah. And I thought that July 2 years ago was bad.
That's why I'm just kind of making sure we're aware of the fact that, yes, we're measuring at a potential highest possible point, but we're measuring at a potential high point, not highest possible. There's a difference. Nobody can predict what the groundwater will be next year.
correct.
So yes. Oh, sure. We can go from 12 inches down to 1 inch. No problem. But we are like right on 1 inch, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one and an eighth or something like that. Right. So it's
if I could
right there.
Address that. This is, the soils in this area are beautiful, sand and gravel. I mean, it's an old gravel pit. And to raise the water table a lot takes a huge volume of water because it's such a broad, flat area for the water to infiltrate. So I mean, you'll have some fluctuations. My guess is it's going to go down, not up. But that we do the best we can and we use a soil evaluation, and that was the basis for determining the elevation that we're using.
One sec, Kevin. My other question was, we talked about the tank, more than 3 feet of cover over.
Mhm.
You said it was 4.6 and 4.7. What
Yep.
was that? Maybe I'm recollecting wrong. Was that 6 feet basically last time we talked? Was there a major change to affect that?
I think I believe Pat said it was under 6, and we were asked to specifically show exactly what it is. So that's what we have done here. We also went out and shot additional topo in that specific area because we knew the board was concerned about exactly how much it was. So last Friday, Pat went out with my surveyor and shot actual field grades existing where those tanks are proposed. And he also verified the elevation of this manholes on the existing septic tank because we wanted to present the board with the verified numbers. We wanted to double check it ourselves so that we knew exactly. And that's where the 4.6 and 4.7 came from.
Okay, so there was no change in any sort of component or plan or anything. It's just we were able to measure it better this time.
Well, we went out specifically and got shots out there to verify it. Before we had contours that were interpolated by the computer. And when Pat went out there last Friday, they shot them in the actual area. There were minor changes. If you recall last week, Pat said, or 2 weeks ago, Pat said it was a 2-inch offset. When we put everything in and we had actual shots out there, that's why it's only 1 inch today, because we went and got additional field data to fine tune the topo in that area so we could give you real exact numbers of what we were seeing.
Got it. So we have better measurements this time. Got it.
Yeah, it was real measurements instead of interpolations by the computer, if that helps.
Human 1, computer 0. Kevin Baker, you had something else?
I was ready to make a motion if the board is ready for that.
If there are no questions from the audience. And no further discussion, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to grant the variance to allow more than 3 feet, less than 6 feet of cover above the tanks and less than 12 inches and 1 inch or more above the estimated high groundwater table, the inlet of the septic tank pipe.
I want to stress making sure that 1 inch stays 1 inch. So I'll second that.
Jim will be inspecting the.
Yep.
And we'll get as-built. Yep.
The motion included greater than 1 inch, approved less than 12 inch. Yes. Okay,
Yep.
That's a second, Kevin.
Yeah, that's a second.
All right, motion and a second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Thank you all for your hard work on this. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time tonight.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, good night.
Good night.
All right. 7:40 p.m. discussion, Title V waiver procedure. Jim,
So,
the floor is yours.
that's awesome. Can I share my screen? I think, or maybe you guys have it in the packet, the Title V waiver information I gave you last time. I forget if I sent it to Brenda in time for the packet or not. I have it on my screen otherwise.
Go ahead and share, Jim,
All right, so let me,
if you can.
yeah, I'm not very good at, I'm not very good at all of this, get rid of that and get rid of that. And, I don't know, can you see that there? Is that showing up on your screen?
Nope, don't have it.
Okay, so it's my inability to use Zoom, so let me just try this. Share. That's better. Now, how about now?
It's getting there.
All right, good.
Yes,
So-
indeed.
So this was the document from Lunenburg went through putting sewer in a big part of their town, and Ashburnham did before that. Lunenburg had a nice form and setup, so I think I had provided this to the board at some point in time. The reason I'm bringing this up now is that I think, and I just need to confirm it with Corey at the water department, I believe they signed contracts to do the sewer system in town, which by Title V would allow you to grant waivers to people having to install Title V systems while they wait to connect to a sewer line. So that, the code talks about that you can do that when a contract, financial commitment is made to sewer the area. And they allow you to do that for up to, grant a waiver up to 5 years. So there's some legwork that needs to be done. A couple of things I think we need to do is confirm with Corey that what they signed was actually a contract to put the sewer in. I assume it is. I've not been involved in that, so I'm not sure. The second part would be to determine who all can tie into that, because I think there was some opt-in, opt-outs as part of that. And so that would be important, because if somebody comes and asks for a waiver and they opted out, you don't grant them a waiver because they opted out. They can't tie into the system. So those are two pieces of information I think the board needs to have. But what they when Lunenburg did there, they put a short kind of procedure together, which is right here. What you're essentially waiving is people having to install a new system because theirs has failed. That doesn't mean that if it's bubbling all on the ground, you could say, leave it bubbling on the ground for the next 5 years till you can tie into sewer. That means, and there's language in there that, the board may request, or may require rather, that people do some mitigation if the system is really causing an issue to public health and safety while they wait to tie into sewer. So again, this is more to kind of bring it back up again, because I did have someone call and ask about whether the board was granting waivers yet. And I said, the board has kind of talked about it. They've seen a waiver process. They don't have one in place yet. And I just wanted to get it on your radar so that, at some subsequent meeting, if you want to go through, take a look at this, see what you'd like to keep, what you'd like to add. I think when Lunenburg did this, the other pages are the actual waiver agreement. And I believe they had town council go through and approve this. So whether you want to start with this, because it kind of talks about all of, the things, considerations that are there. So always required an inspection of Title V, Title V inspection on the system, even if you're going to grant a waiver of it, because that allows the board to know the condition of the system. And this is going to sound bad. Sometimes the system failed because it's in the water table. That's bad, but it's not blowing onto the surface of the ground. So you may still grant a waiver. If it were to surface, you may require pumping at some frequency. We even had a situation in Ashburnham where they had such a leaky cesspool type tank that we made them put in a tight tank so they could at least hold the wastewater so they could pump it at some frequency. So, it gives you the ability to say, yes, we'll grant you a waiver with this kind of a condition. And so, and so I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it tonight, but I did want to bring it back up because I'm being asked the questions and I wanted you to have that. I don't know if you still have it. I can send this document out to people so you can take a look.
It looks like I have it from March 22nd.
Okay.
I did not remember it. It was long enough ago, but yes, thank you for bringing it back up.
No, again, it's one of these things people are asking. So I said, well, maybe we need to do this sooner than later. So I'll bring it back up to the board.
Yeah. So going down that road, it's establish this waiver process. Yes, have council review. We decide on it. And then as you're mentioning it, we figure out the date we would start actually doing this based upon when they have signed contracts to say, yes, the work is going to start. And then determine some timeline for that project, right? So we know how long of a waiver we're giving. You mentioned 5 years, but if it doesn't have to be 5 years, then it doesn't have to be 5 years.
No, and I think in here it mentions that as soon as you can tie in, you have to tie in. So it's not like you have 5 years to tie in. If you're on this waiver, you need to tie into the system. They put a date in there. I forget how they did that date because you can say it was about 15 years ago, and I don't remember back 15 years ago.
Yeah. I'm going to just hijack my colleagues here for now. Do you know if if there is any sort of collaboration between Lunenburg's Board of Health and the sewer project to help prioritize properties that might have applied for a waiver. So you could say, hey, fellas, you know, if you're working on this area, can we do this sooner?
So I think, and I can't speak to how all projects go in, but I assume when the sewer department is putting the system in, they're putting it in some kind of systematic order that, you know, obviously starts at the plant, works the other way, or maybe the plant gets going and the piping to the plant gets going so that at some point in time they're closed. I don't know that it's that granular that you can say, hey, look at run this little leg first, because you may need to put trunk lines and whatnot in before you get to a piece of it. So, so I think that's why it's written that as soon as it's available, you got to tie in.
Yeah, no, I was curious. Even if it's like, you know, I'm going down this street or this street next.
Yep.
Hey, can you
Right.
do that street first, please? Just curious.
Yeah, no, that's, and I, like I said, I think that was more dictated by their construction schedule and what they needed to get completed when. And then occasionally that you hit ledge and that changes people's construction schedule.
And then my other question is, you mentioned the opt-out, and you probably don't have information on this, but board, this came up a long time ago, and we were concerned about the legality of some of the opt-out agreements that the town had agreed to, perhaps is what I should say. I don't assume anybody has any further detail on that.
No, I haven't heard anything more about that. No.
Okay. Kevin Baker, you were chair back then. Do you recall?
Yeah, Corey came to us with the language, I recall, and we sort of said, that language should be changed. It doesn't behoove public health to have people to be able to opt out. And we weren't comfortable with that language. However, I believe Dan made a comment that it was, that horse was out of the barn and they were too far down the road on the document, with the state and the legislative process.
Yeah.
To make any adjustments to that at that time. And I don't know
concern was
what
that-
happened. I don't know what happens after that. If there's any changes that can happen or what the process is to adjust those opt-out clauses. It would be great if we just said, you know, the sewer's here. You have to connect to it.
Gonna say, I got some, through the chair, if you wouldn't mind, sir.
Go ahead.
I got some feedback from some neighbors, and basically they're like, you know, no one should be forced to go sign up for sewer, and I hear them, but I don't agree with that outcome. I understand it's forcing somebody to go get hooked up to a sewer system, which will cost a considerable amount of money and all that kind of good stuff, but it's a matter of public health, and I think that removing one more septic system is a good thing. So,
And the distinction, if I recall correctly, Kevin, is that actually you could opt out because you don't want to fund that connection today. But the sticky part came in that, I believe, Jim can correct me, Title V say, if your system fails and you have access to public sewer, then you don't get to put a new system in. You then have to connect to public sewer. And what Littleton said in their opt-out was, you can opt out permanently. And that became the frankly legislative conflict, because it appears that we have two different things that are in contrary to each other. And that's where we have to figure out what's going to happen, because Title V says one thing and potentially the Littleton opt-out agreement says something else.
And that's
Well,
my understanding too with the legislative piece.
yeah, and I would hope that the opt-out is not permanent, because that's just not an appropriate thing for public health.
Okay, so I know it's a sideline to Jim. You're bringing this up. We still have to go down this road, but we need to be better informed about what the situation is, and if it requires us to get council's input on how we're going to handle the situation. Like you said, when somebody either asks for a waiver or has an opt-out, how that situation might play out. Not that it ever will, thank you, please, hopefully, but let's be prepared.
So what I can do is try to get the data from water sewer about the list of people, the timelines, and yes, in fact, they've signed the contract. If you all want to take a look at that, if we bring those two things together at a subsequent meeting, maybe we can have the kernel of a plan going forward.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, yeah, once you know when you can get that, then get back on the agenda for it.
Sure.
Kevin Baker, because you'd started that line of questioning many, many months ago, could you restart that at least? And hand it off to the chair as soon as it becomes really cantankerous?
And we could even use the new OneNote storage or OneDrive storage area to put all those documents in.
We could. Okay, good to move on.
Do we need to vote on adopting the waiver?
I think you probably want to look at it, make sure it's what you want.
It was a discussion piece, and I think we want more board input on that, I would say.
I would definitely say that we need to get the waiver together. I think all of us know that we want to go in the direction of a waiver. It was only the discussion item also on the agenda. It wasn't a public hearing.
I'll ask Brenda to resend that septic waiver document out, or Brenda is here. I can say, Brenda, please send the septic waiver process form from March 22nd back out to the board so that they can all review it. And
I can do that.
thank you. And Jim, you can stop sharing,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, see.
or I can maybe do that for you. No, I can't. Next on the agenda is 7:50 p.m. the ID Decision Support Tool. That's me. Found it. Okay, here is the latest update of our infectious agent decision support tool. Kind of curious times going on with COVID-19 coronavirus is that there are lots of variants out there right now. And we've kind of been at this XBB 0.1.5 for some time, but it is rapidly dwindling. And there is an all new collection of letters. It is still an Omicron variant, but it is now EG5 that I believe is prevalent in the Philippines and other areas, that is growing here in the United States. Common message you've been hearing is, no, we don't know a whole lot about the variant. Yes, it appears that our vaccinations do appear to be reasonably effective against them. But it is there are kind of these four variants right now that are all kind of fighting for the highest prevalence. So I think it just becomes a little harder for science, because when there are that many variants out there, it's harder to identify trends and keep track of what might be a problem. But our standard message of the variants are out there. Please make sure you're taking care of yourself. On the good side, Littleton officially has no reported cases over the past few weeks. We're over a month now. Our ICU bed access is still below 80%, so that makes us feel not too panicky. The vaccination, we had that conversation last time about this data just not being available, so we're going to continue to work to see if we can get some better data. The wastewater numbers have popped back up. They were at 304 and 470, and they're kind of in the 300s and 400s. They have not actually been that high since probably the late winter, early spring. So a long time ago, we hoped that this might be a really valuable indicator for what might be coming. And I think it kind of just got smothered by the high quantities of Omicron cases we had early. I'm curious to see if this is going to maybe highlight some change coming or not. As of this point, I can't really say scientifically that this is a major concern, but it is noteworthy that last time I reported, we were at really, really historic lows. And now all of a sudden we've jumped back up into something a bit higher. And lastly, the one I'm going to kind of keep open for the summer is going to be the arbovirus section. So Tripoli and West Nile virus, both still low, no human case counts in our area. So that is a good thing. Influenza and RSV we'll see in the fall.
And they got the new RSV vaccination approved for the young ones. And I think, if I remember correctly, the elderly population is coming soonish, if I remember reading it correctly. But the young population definitely has a new tool in the toolbox, shall we say, which is awesome.
That would be terrific. All these kids get to grow up without fun things like chickenpox and RSV someday.
Yeah. Can't wait.
That's our update. That brings us to our administrative matters. We have meeting minutes for approval. We will start with September 28th of 2022. I need both of you to say yes. Have you both had time to review those minutes?
Yeah, I didn't find them in the OneDrive. I did get the email though.
Correct. We haven't really launched the meeting minute approval process through OneDrive. Let's talk about that at the next meeting when hopefully we have everybody, because everybody will have to participate in that process. And how about I do this? Maybe we should do like a kind of walkthrough on screen so we can all be agreed upon of what we're expected to do and looking to do. Does that sound good?
That's a
We do
great
a little
idea.
demo.
Mhm.
So that way, I'll keep an eye out. So when Brenda sends the whatever minutes we have, I'll put it up there as kind of a temporary, and we can walk through the process. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Let's do that next time.
Yeah, I don't want to just say, "Oh, this is how we have to do it now." I expect everybody to get right on it.
Oh, no. We need to give a
Our
little bit of
compliance
time.
with this is so great as it is. So, okay, so September 28th.
Yep.
Any changes or comments, or do we have a motion?
I think I'm good. I have a motion to accept the September 28th, 2022 minutes.
Second,
Motion and second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. The September 28th, 2022 minutes are approved. The July 12th, 2023 minutes. I had one just clarification note for Brenda. At the very end of the document, when we're talking about member updates, there's a variance requests subheader, and that's fine. That if you wanted to just add that it was Matt Wason saying that, it kind of came after a Kevin Davis comment, so I just didn't want to have that get confused. Does that make sense?
Good catch. I didn't see that one.
Brenda, did you hear me?
We can. I guess we actually do need a response.
Last chance. Brenda, are you there? Okay, why don't we come back to that? We'll just pitch over.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from July 12, 2023 with your changes.
My apologies. I couldn't see the screen to find the unmute button. So I apologize. So yes, I will make that change.
Okay, so you heard me, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I
Okay,
did
all right.
hear you. Yes.
In that case, Kevin Baker, please go ahead with that motion you were going to make.
Motion to accept the minutes from July 12th, 2023 with Matt Wason's changes.
And I'll second that.
That's motion second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker,
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis votes yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Minutes approved with edits. Edit, singular. Next on the agenda, correspondence. I am not aware of any additional correspondence. Anybody else?
I got nothing.
Good, good.
Yep.
Board member updates. Kevin Davis, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I already talked about the RSV thing. Go talk to your local pediatrician to go figure out if you have children of that age or going to have children of that age. Something you might want to think about when the fall comes around to definitely look at. The second thing up on the OneDrive in the new directory I created today is the Board of Health, Board of Code of Conduct or Ethics. I did put that up there. And again, per our conversation, we need to do try again. Our next meeting, we should probably have a discussion item about the Code of Ethics and talk about each of the lines that are in there. So that way we can appropriately amend things as we go through. But I took the changes that we had talked about the last time and they are incorporated into that document.
So we can go in there, track changes, and have it ready for August 9th.
Track changes are currently there. Yeah.
Okay.
They're turned on. The document's saved that way. So you should be good to go, question mark.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no worries.
Experiment.
It's an experiment. Here we go. Moving with technology and scissors fast.
Thank you. Kevin Baker, anything?
No. Nope. We've said enough.
You've said enough. I also do not have any updates. I will ask Jim one last question, and that is with odors, is there any review process for facilities that are known to produce odors? So that, is there a design review basically for places that are historically known to cause nuisance odors? Is there anything like that that I should know about? You're muted.
When we're reviewing building plans, we will often put generic statements in that, whatever it is can't create dust, noise, or odors that would cause a condition of air pollution. It's hard to know sometimes whether something will or won't. I think these days people look at marijuana facilities as, yes, there's the potential for odor. How you would address that, I don't know. I think they're doing it kind of now as part of the addition to that building. And then the report, as the gentleman mentioned, came over today, so I didn't have a chance to review it, and I can certainly, I don't know if it came to me or to everybody, but they mentioned, kind of walking around the building smelling. That's all well and good, but it's not them saying our building doesn't smell, it's the abutter saying your building smells. And so that's really how, and I hate to make it that simple, but that's really what you're looking at when you're looking at the air pollution regulations. And I will mention that odor, that frequency and intensity is important. Just kind of a reasonableness thing. I mean, if you said, hey, it stunk that one time, we're taking it to court, the judge may just throw you out of court.
Sure.
So, and I know they're frustrating. And so, but it does take a while to build time. And that's why we generally ask people, when is it happening? When do you notice it? Crane Road's a good distance from that facility. So I don't know if the person is walking and picking up the odor from there. The other person who has provided documentation when there's an odor lives kind of downhill road a bit, almost kind of across, kitty corner across from the facility. So, and that's not to say that on any given day that stuff's not getting out and you're getting a little bit of a stink, but.
No, I'm just more curious about like the next time, not even necessarily Littleton, but the next time somebody goes to submit plans to have one of these built, of course, it's going to have that line item. Make sure you don't smell. But who, if there aren't eyeballs on it to say, I'm not sure you're going to have enough. And then you turn into potentially years of retrofits, complaints, unhappiness. I'm just very curious about if there's anything that could improve that process, but
I think knowing what we know now, if a facility came in, it's like, provide us with your plans for addressing that. So at least you do your due diligence upfront.
Yeah.
It may not work. I mean, again, I've been in the building a couple of times, so I get a sense of the different spaces that you're in and how you're opening doors and making a difference. And the last time I was there, it was so obvious that when we were on the loading dock and there was no smell, and as soon as they opened up the door to fill a truck, all of a sudden the smell come rushing in. It's like something's happening in this building. So when they talk about that, I've experienced that in the building. And so that's why when I mentioned last time, I thought it was an HVAC exercise. It sounds like they're doing some of that. Maybe it's more just maintenance of the devices to make sure that you don't get fugitive odors out. But it also sounds like, putting in, carbon filtration, I think, is just kind of a mathematical equation. You need this much carbon to capture this much odor. And you can kind of figure out when they need to be changed so that you're not having an issue. So.
I think back to our process point here, one of our lessons learned that we should take away from this is that the normal, quote unquote, normal maintenance schedule for this should not be used. You should be using a very aggressive maintenance schedule, because those seals, oh yeah, well, they typically last blah, 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 da, 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 da. Yeah. Okay. No, every year, replace them. Every 6 months, replace them, whatever it is, because
Be
I think
proactive.
yes. Yeah. We need to be proactive. I think is an easy term. I think we need to be, just leaning far, far forward and doing that. So that's something I think from a process perspective and a policy perspective, we should really, internalize with this. The other thing I'll do is I did find the article that talked about cannabis processing facilities, and granted it was for Denver and not for the state of Massachusetts as far as a study, but remember, Colorado's had it a few years before we have, and so they've got a few other points of view, and they have a real problem with air pollution getting trapped right at the foothills, which is very close to where Denver is. So let me go grab that and see if I can get that to Brenda so that she can get it to the rest of the board. I'll just send that as an email. But that would be something that's like paragraph 3. It is a known problem of odors emanating from a cannabis processing facility. It's like plain statement. So anyway, belabored. I'm
All right.
done.
thank
too
you
late.
for that additional discussion. That's all I have.
So since Gino's not here, can I make a motion?
You may.
Can I make a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll second that.
Motion second. Roll call vote. Kevin Baker.
Kevin Baker votes yes.
Kevin Davis.
Kevin Davis votes, hey, yes.
Matt Wason votes yes. Thank you all for a good meeting. Thank you, Jim.
Yes. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Judy. Thanks.
Thanks.
See you guys later.